Hey everybody, and welcome to my basement. I'm Coach Jim Bridgham, and today we're going to be going through some principles on leadership. Now you'll notice that first today we don't have sticky notes on here to pull off, and we're going to go with this as an experiment. And thank you for bearing with me as I continue through the beard apocalypse, as my middle daughter calls it, as I experiment trying to grow a beard. America. So why are we in a basement? First of all, we're in a basement to work in the basement of your heart. And the things we don't talk about in social sectors, we don't talk about at the dinner table, generally speaking. We want to find a place to work quickly on some issues and get you through them. Now, if you need to work on these deeper, you can always find a coach. You can work with me or any coach that's certified and just try to get through this because life's too short to live a mediocre life, honest to God. Okay, so I've got 3 points today. You're going to see presence to persuade, approachability to hear, and compassion to impart. So first, presence to persuade. The first point's to live your message. I think when we're trying to live any message, we need to do what we say or walk the talk. So for me, I have a pretty big commitment to fitness and to yoga and so forth. So every day I make sure I post a picture in my story for Instagram, Facebook, etc., talking or showing that I'm physically at the gym doing it. Now, some days it's hard. It's not easy. It's not like I'm doing some spectacular yoga moves every day. It's just not realistic. But I am there every day, and it shows that I am living authentically the message I'm going forward with. And same thing with my kids. If you went and talked to them right now and said, hey, how's Jim as a dad? I would hope that they'd say at least decent. Now they're teenagers, so they might say, it's annoying. Probably, but at least you know that I'm living the message that of authentic as a good husband, good dad, good friend. I would hope so. So you got to live your message to maintain a presence to persuade people. Ultimately, we want to persuade people, whether you're in business, sales, whether it's your spouse, whether it's friends, we want to persuade them to come to our ideas, to persuade them to be our friends, to persuade them to go to live life with us. There's a lot of choice out there. So how are you going to persuade them? Again, the first one's an authentic life, living your message. The second one's compassion. Now, compassion's super hard because we get so judgy. If you're not judgy or don't think you're judgy, you're probably lying to yourself. Let's just be honest for a minute. You see that person wearing a short skirt or maybe super tight jeans in the mall, you're like, I see how it is. We all become judgy at a point, and that's okay. It's first to acknowledge that we're being judgy and to recognize it's important to kind of suspend that as we talk to people and approach people with compassion. I remember one time I was in a meeting, I walked into in a professional environment, and my manager saw the janitorial staff come in and get some of the food from this potluck that we were having and made a disparaging comment about janitors. Well, when I was in grad school for 3 years, in residence grad school, I was janitoring, and so was my wife in the early morning hours and late night hours. We were cleaning a counseling center, library, classrooms, buildings, and it's really not a great job, honestly. In fact, cleaning a counseling center was a little bit brutal. I remember for this specific counseling center was for low-income kids, and I still remember the day I went into one of the bathrooms and said, I'm just going to quit. I can't do this. And I forced myself to do it, recognizing that if I clean this facility well, that it's going to help to enable the counselors to do their work even better, because it's a place that folks want to go to that's clean, that's neat, etc. That provides an environment for folks to find help and resources that they need. It didn't make it easier. It was still a pretty crappy job, but it still needed to be done. And I needed to approach it with compassion. The same thing with other people who come to me and say wildly stupid things, whether it's in a coaching session, a counseling session, or whatever, that I have to come to them and say, wow, that's really interesting. I've never heard that before. To sit there and listen to them with a compassion, recognizing they don't have the same life experience as me. I can't expect them to live or act the same way I do. We have different values, different interests, and we need to make sure we approach them and recognize, hey, they're different than us, and they're going to approach life differently, and that's okay. Okay, third point, presence to persuade, non-judgment. I can't emphasize this enough. I said it before, but not just non-judgment of suspending the judginess, but suspending your facial expressions. Imagine you come to me and we're in a coaching session and you start talking about something that's totally off the wall. And I go like, with my face, say, okay. I may say okay in a non-judgment way, but my facial expression just said, ew. So we need to make sure when we're approaching with non-judgment, it's not just taking or imposing our values and what they're telling us or confiding in us. It's also saying for a minute, I'm going to just sit here and listen and suspend everything and just let them be heard. And I'm going to get in some more detail on that later, but if you want to persuade people, you need to be a stellar listener. You need to be who you are, authentic, and be a great listener. Next point, approachability to hear. Approachability to hear. The first point here is warm curiosity. As a coach, I have to be curious about whatever you're telling me. So if you come and talk to me in a coaching session or tell me about anything, and I say, wow, that's really interesting, I need to look at it and say, well, how'd you arrive at that choice? Why did you do that? Like, just be wildly curious about anything that comes to you. Do this with your kids. Try it tonight if you have kids. Be like, oh, well, why'd you make that choice? How come you chose that game? Why do you like that YouTuber? All of those questions are just curiosity. And it's a lot more interesting than just saying, like when your kid comes up to you and says, oh, Shane Dawson's the best YouTuber, and he's pretty awesome. Shout out, Shane, love you. But when you sit back and say, why do you choose Shane? Like, why does he? When does he post? What are his shows like? And I've watched a lot of his shows, and they're really interesting. But you have to sit back and say, like, okay, why does my daughter think he's so great? It's curious, right? Okay, and he is a good-looking guy, so that could be it. Okay, next one, listen. Not just listening, like, okay, listening passively, but listen actively. And I suggest when you're listening to someone, the only thing you should be almost focusing on your breath and just fully invested in what they're saying in front of you. You don't worry about your response. Don't worry if you have something interesting to interject. Just if you get those kind of distracting thoughts, acknowledge them and say, okay, I'm thinking, and go back to just listening to the person. I find that when you're listening to someone, whether it's in coaching, a family member, friend, kids, it's like the first time they've been listened to. I've had sometimes my kids and sometimes friends who I've just listened to for a while, and they go on and they'll apologize. Oh my gosh, I talked for 45 minutes and I've said nothing, which you can imagine is hard for someone like me that seems to love to talk. But I sat down and listened and said, wow, that's interesting. And they said, you're the first person that's listened to me, and just start crying or need a hug and all those good things. But I'll just tell you, listening is a huge skill. And it's not easy. It's not easy, especially if someone's telling you stuff that they don't like. I'd listened to this psychologist one time. He comes in and he's like, coaching, stupid. And I'm sitting there listening to him for like 45 minutes. Now, I've been coaching for 16 years. Like, this is a big deal. And it's just me and him and one person who's like aghast that this guy's saying it. And at the end, he goes, well, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm a life coach. That's what I do. And he's just like, and I said, well, and this is how it differs from psychology and counseling, and just shared it with him. And at the end, he's like, I just never thought of it like that way. I changed his whole mind, but it was because I had respected the way what his opinions were, which I still disagree with, but that's okay. I'm sure he's a good person in his heart, deep down. Rapport building. When you build rapport with somebody, that's going into a place where they feel comfortable around you. Now, the best way to do it is to make sure that your arms are open. So if you notice my arms are in open position, usually they're flinging around somewhere, because that's how I roll. Even when I'm on the phone coaching folks, if I pace while I'm doing it, my hands are like talking, like they can see me, which they can't. Thank goodness, they might think I'm a crazy person. But if you're sitting there like this, you can kind of see my arms across. That sends the message of, hey, don't communicate to me. If I'm holding something in front of me, whether it's a cup of coffee, a book, a notebook, a planner, and holding it, it becomes what? A shield. It's a shield between me and you. Instead, if you want to build rapport with somebody, the easiest tip to start is just have an open body position. Just have your arms open back and just listen. And if you feel awkward, you're at a party and you don't know how to dance, like great dance moves, just sit there and just be like, okay, cool. And just try to find an open position and listen and just nod, smile, and just listen, again, from that non-judgment perspective. I know most of this concept of leadership is really listening. Because if you want to lead someone and talk into their lives, coach, counselor, leader, manager, you need to listen first. Where are they coming from? You just have to if you want to be successful. So the next one and the final piece, so we had presence to persuade, approachability to hear. The third one is compassion to impart. Now, we talked about compassion a little bit, but I want to go a deep dive. If you want to be the best, most compassionate leader out there, there are two things that I tell people to do all the time. And it's so ridiculous. And this works in your relationship. This works with your kids. This works in any context. Again, we've already talked about non-judgment. So when we do this, we're in a place of non-judgment. You acknowledge, you validate, and you express caring. Acknowledge and validate. I don't care if you have the most wild, crazy feeling about something. Like, let's say you come to me and be like, oh my gosh, I love the way the Denver Broncos are playing this 2019 season. They're going to kill it. They're going to win the Super Bowl. Like, this is it. And I feel it. Now, anyone who watches them right now is probably going to say, mm-hmm. And if you're not a sports guy, that's okay. Just bear with me. Just know that that's probably not in the cards. So I would say, wow, the Broncos are really important to you. And that seems like a like it's important that they win for you, and you think they're gonna. Now, I'm holding back as much judgment as I can as a Broncos fan, by the way, but to say, like, okay, I'm acknowledging the feeling they have, the emotion, and validating it. Now, that's a minor thing, a sports thing, but some people come to say all kinds of things, like, oh my gosh, I failed this test, I hate myself, and I'm gonna harm myself as a result. Well, I would say, wow, it sounds like you're really upset about failing this test and that you want to, hurt yourself to kind of expunge that guilt. Like, yes. Well, what's a better choice? Like, what's a different choice you could make? And maybe not better, difference probably better in that case. As you can see, we're not exactly scripted here, but to say, well, what's a different choice you can make? And in my context, which I worked for the last 16 years, I never lost a person to suicide. And in that job I was doing for a long time, that's a big challenge. And that's a big success. So I'd say for you is to always acknowledge and validate and then express caring. Just like I mentioned in another video about people who tell me stories like GMO stories, genetically modified objects, I think. When they talk about food that's been modified, I don't really care. But I hear it and I'll acknowledge, validate, and say, wow, that's really important stuff. Because for him it is. It may not be important to you at all. And this is where things like teenage issues, if you have teenagers, come into play. They come to you, you have a real schedule of real things to do. It's the laundry, the food, things like that. They are super important things that need to get done to get through your day so you can go to bed. Your kid comes to you and says, I had a problem with my other student today. And it really hurt, or I'm frustrated. Or they don't even say that. They just come home and go, ugh, which is what most teenagers do. And you just acknowledge and validate them and then express caring. And you stop when you're doing it. So you don't do two things, because multitasking is a myth. We'll get a video on that eventually. Total myth. Stop, acknowledge, validate, express caring. That's it. Okay, so today's what we went over on leadership principles: presence to persuade, approachability to hear, and compassion to impart. Love to hear what you think about this video. This is our fourth one. We're getting a little better. Thank you so much for tuning in and working with me and supporting me in this coaching journey. If I can be of help to you, the website's below. You can always email, reach out to me on social media. But for now, I just hope you go live your best life. Life's too short to be mediocre. So go be amazing today and impact some people and lead them. We need you. We need you to lead. We need you to be who you are called to be on this earth. The odds of you being here are infinitesimally small from any perspective, whether you're a person of faith or someone that just sees that we evolved over time. The odds are crazy. You need to be you. So bring the best you to everything you're doing. Have an awesome day today.